right, guys. Welcome to Mold Part 2. Dr. Joel here. We're talking about detoxing mold easily. If you saw Part 1, you know that we went through talking about mold from a very basic perspective. What is mold? Specifically, we talked about the differences between mold being a fungus. We talked about the fact that mold gives off mold spores that are called mycotoxins. And when we breathe those in, if we're not able to detox well, those can cause all kinds of issues for us. So let's kind of jump into this. Let's talk about detoxifying mold and what that looks like, how to do it easily, and really how we've found such great success here in our practice at doing this. So first off, I want to just kind of bring in this little bit here. Whether you've been diagnosed or you suspect that you have mold, maybe even you've been working with a doctor to detox mold, maybe you've not been able to do it very successfully, I think that this video is going to help you tremendously. The key to detoxing mold easily is understanding the biochemistry. We're going to get into that in this video. And then I'll also talk about some specific approaches in our office versus kind of like general recommendations and so forth. So, number one here, when we talk about detoxing mold, we're talking about the biochemistry. Let's zoom that in so it's just right. Perfect. We're talking about the biochemistry of mold. So I want you to understand that mold is, from a biochemistry perspective, considered what's called an acetaldehyde. Some people say it acetaldehyde. The acetaldehydes, these from a chemical perspective, this is really any chemical in the air, any impurity that we're breathing in. So mold fits into this chemical category. If you are having issues with some kind of a candle, kind of that smell in the air from a candle, or a perfume, or some kind of chemical that's sprayed in the air, maybe it's even like cigarette smoke. All of those things are considered acetaldehydes, and the body breaks these down naturally and very easily if it has the right nutrients. So if we look at this, we take acetaldehydes, our body uses acetaldehyde dehydrogenase, which is an enzyme, and it uses these cofactors in order to turn this into acetic acid, which is essentially neutralized, and actually acetic acid then goes on to what's called the TCA cycle, and that's where we make a lot of ATP and energy within our mitochondria. So the reason why mold toxicity and these mycotoxins can cause such an issue with things is because we actually run into a low amount of acetic acid. Therefore, our mitochondria are just impacted negatively. They're not able to make ATP and result in energy and all these different things. Now let's look at this. The most important piece in this whole equation is understanding the cofactors. So you have iron, vitamin B2, also known as riboflavin, vitamin B3, also known as niacin or niacinamide, and then you have molybdenum. So all of these vitamins and minerals are going to be needed in order to undergo this process. One of the things that we do in our office is we're checking specifically when someone has a mold toxicity issue. From part one, we talked about diagnosing that. We talked about how you can have so many different symptoms when you have mold toxicity, whether it's extreme fatigue, maybe it's chronic pain, maybe it's just inflammation, maybe there's sleep issues like insomnia, maybe there's anxiety or depression, maybe there's neurological symptoms. The many symptoms with mold toxicity is one of the main reasons why mold can basically be hard to diagnose. But we talked about how, if you're seeing those yellow water stains and spots in the ceiling, chances are there's a water leak there somewhere, and there's a good chance there may be mold close by. We talked about, of course, anytime you see any kind of like black thing growing on the wall, like that's mold. We gotta watch out for that, and really want to make sure that that's taken care of so we're not breathing all those toxins in. So we talked about those things, and then we also talked about diagnosing mold toxicity, right? So you have kind of two ways that you can do it. One is through a lab test, and we went through that in part one, and then we also talked about a really good biofeedback technique that uses muscle testing, something like Systems Healthcare, which is a technique that I do in my office, and a lot of my colleagues use as well. So when we're looking at this with patients, I'm checking patients in my office to see, Number one, is there mold toxicity? Okay, if there is, what nutrients do you have? What nutrients are you lacking? And of course, what do you need? So a lot of times we'll end up supplementing with vitamin B3 and or molybdenum if both are needed. And B3 and molybdenum are usually very safe to supplement with. There's really no concerns or risks there. I will say with B3, depending on the company that you use for that supplement, it's very possible to get what's called a niacinamide flush or a niacin flush. That's basically where you get too much B3 and then your skin will have this red flush to it for a little while. That is an issue I've run into with multiple different companies for that. And so my favorite is Thorne. Thorne has a great niacinamide that doesn't have that issue, and it works really well. Now, iron and B2, this is what I want to talk about. This is really important. Iron and B2 are a couple of those nutrients that can be deficient because of different infections like bacteria, fungus, sometimes parasites that feed on those things, which means if you're deficient in iron and B2 and you need that in order to break down mold, if you supplement with those, you might actually make certain gut issues worse. And so it's really, really important to understand if you're deficient in those things because of a gut infection, or if you're not, and all that looks like. So we check those things in our office as well, and I would strongly recommend really being really cautious and careful with supplementing with any iron and B2 because of those issues. Now, with mold, we're going to talk about this more in part 3, where we get into the importance of killing mold. And essentially you have this component, which is detoxing the mold spores. If the spores are there long enough, it can actually migrate to your gut and start growing and turning into that fungus in your gut, and now you have another issue. Oftentimes when I'm seeing patients that have been having these issues, oftentimes by the time I see them, they do have some kind of gut issue, whether it is the fungus and the mold in their gut, or maybe it's some kind of other gut issue they've had for a while. Therefore, they're pretty low in iron and B2. We have to address those infections in order to get the iron and B2 back. As long as they have those infections, they'll always be deficient in that iron and B2. And you really, it's not something that you will want to supplement with. So that is my caution to you. Consider vitamin B3, niacinamide, consider molybdenum, but be very cautious with iron and B2. Now, in our office with detoxing mold, we have a 100% success rate, and I'm very thankful to God for that. But one of the keys to that is this formula and understanding of the biochemistry. Now, I know that a lot of practitioners will approach mold and detoxing mold, and they'll use a lot of different binders. And the idea is that it grabs the mold and detoxes it out. I think that there can be a lot of benefit there, but I've found so much success and found that this is so simple and easy with at least the technique that I do, that it works every single time. I want to share that, and I don't want to put down the binders, but also want to say, hey, this is amazing stuff. I want you to make sure to kind of understand this and take this into consideration if you're having issues with detoxing mold. All right. So next in part 3, don't forget to kill it too. We're talking about killing mold. One of the things that I always share with patients, and I'll kind of slide to this next slide here about connecting. One of the things I share with patients is, if you want to really get to the bottom of these issues, if you want to really figure out what is going on with any kind of mold toxicity, or what you need to detox that mold specifically and quickly, I would search for a systems healthcare practitioner. Now, here's a list of things here with our schedule. You can book a free consult with us, with me over the phone. You can schedule your first telehealth appointment if you're not in driving distance, or even if you're not up to fly in, or you can schedule your new appointment here in Dallas. I'll put the links in the description, as well as most of my descriptions, as far as the schedule, the social medias, but then also a link to find a systems healthcare practitioner. Systems healthcare is the technique that I use in practice, and like I said, there is roughly 20 or so people in the country that are certified in this technique. awesome technique, and it's really amazing at helping get to the bottom of these issues with high accuracy and figuring out how to address them as efficient as possible. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to check out our other videos. Tune in for part 3 where we talk about killing mold and kind of how to go about that. One of the things I always tell people is if you detox the mold but you don't kill the mold if it's there, and you don't kill that fungus along with it if it's there, essentially you're never going to fully heal and fully get rid of the issue. So it's really important to address both of them. Leave a comment, reach out. We'd love to connect with you. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys in part 3. Thanks.